Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar, Getting Started with Teams Shared Channels, including our special guest, Drew Madelung. My name is Silvio, and I'm a sales executive here at SysKit. And here with me, we have Drew, our guest of the day, and my colleague, Mario, who will be showing us a demo of SysKit Point later on. Many of you already knows SysKit as a company, but maybe I should give you a bit of an introduction. So we're a software development company founded more than 12 years ago. We develop products for Microsoft 365 governance, security, and auditing, as well as some products for SharePoint on-premise, our famous ASP.docket. We currently have over 3,000 clients all across the globe, and we're talking like from SMBs up to the 100K plus thousand environments, corporations, and we currently offer 4 products, including ASP.docket, which I already mentioned for on-premise, and most importantly, the SysKit Point tool that we are going to be actually, talking about today. So before we start, let me give you just a few housekeeping rules on today's webinar. So all of the registrants will receive a recording of the webinar within the few days. After the Drew's presentation, we will also have a quick demo of SysKit Point tool to show you how we can discover all of the shared channels in your tenant. Mario is going to be in charge of that. And after all of that, we will have a Q&A session where Drew and Mario will answer all of your questions. So don't be shy, feel free to ask. And for that, use the Q&A function on the right side of the screen. So you have a click where you can click and then you can put in your question. Okay, so now after boring you with this, let me do an intro of our star. So it is my pleasure to introduce our guest, Drew Madelung. He is a cloud solutions architect and a Microsoft MVP for Office apps and services. He is experienced in a range of technologies, but specializes in collaboration and teamwork workspaces such as Microsoft Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, and so on. Drew has helped to deploy many Microsoft, deploy Microsoft 365 to many global companies while also rolling out modern information protection and information governance technologies. He has been doing Microsoft consulting for some 10 plus years, and he is also a speaker at many Microsoft 365 industry events. I will now give a warm welcome to Drew and let him take over. Drew, are you ready?
I am. Thank you very much, Sylvia, for jumping in and doing that little intro. And I'll give everyone should see my screen now today. So they can confirm you can see that good?
Yes, I can see it.
Awesome. So we're here to talk about shared channels. And this is one that was a product that was released out in the end of March with some more kind of fanfare around it, and one that was actually in private preview for a very long period of time. So I've been working with this solution for a while. I've worked with some organizations to help start to get it stood up, and actually working with internally in my organization as well. So excited to talk about this, a little bit more about myself. So I have been, as Sylvia said, I have been consultant for around 10 years. I work for an organization right now called Protiviti, where I really do help organizations kind of deploy and roll out Microsoft 365. I am a big sports fan, big golfer, and I also have 2 wonderful little daughters that kind of help keep me moving around this time frame here. So any information, if you have any questions, I can definitely reach out to me on my Twitter account. I'm gladly respond to any kind of conversation you want to have, whether it be around Microsoft products, kids, or sports in general. Be glad to chime in. But we're here to talk today about team channels, and I'm going to kind of go through a story through this, which is going to be what are shared channels, how do they work, how do you set them up, so how can you get ready for them in your environment, if that a lot of times you might actually already be set up. And I'll be trying to dive pretty deep into some more of the advanced side of this, of how it functions, and providing a lot of demonstrations about what the experience looks like from an end user perspective and from an administrative perspective. So that's what I'll be kind of running through here. But I want to set the stage because you're going to start to see, you'll see the word Teams Connect. Okay, so when you see the word Microsoft Teams Connect, if you look back at the Ignite videos when this was launched, or any of the blog posts, or now if you look at, there's a build session that came out around Microsoft Teams Connect, and Microsoft Teams Connect is not just shared channels. What the brand of Microsoft Teams Connect is the idea to integrate or to work with other parties. And what happened is what we had before was really just the ability to do shared chats where you could, you have the idea of shared chats is really where you're federating or having a one-on-one or group conversation with someone outside of your organization, right? So I can open up my Teams chat. I can say, I'm going to chat with that person, and it works, right? That doesn't exist in the concept of teams and channels. So you could add guest users into the teams, but that's not the same style of what shared channels is. So shared channels is part of this brand of Teams Connect. So Teams Connect is a brand overall to say, how do we connect other people into our organization using Microsoft Teams? And that's why you end up with shared chats and shared channels as ways to collaborate across organizations. Okay? And so shared chats have been out for a long time. Those are available now. Shared channels became public preview at the end of March. So this is fully available for you to work with. Everything I'll be working with is nothing private. It is simply a open tenant that I'll be demonstrating on. So the reason why shared channels is structured, kind of bringing it up at the highest level of what is a shared channel. And I first kind of started with what is a channel. And a channel is the concept of having a location inside of a team to work. You can't have teams without channels. So whenever you create a team, you get a collection of channels. And before shared channels, we've always had a standard channel and a private channel. So the standard channel means anyone part of that team always has access to that channel. Any of the content in that channel for files, any of the apps, any of the tabs are all part of that standard channel. Everyone on the team has access to it. So think about these and really the differences between these is around permissions. Okay, so standard channels inherit permissions from that parent. Private channels are a subset of members of that team. So I can create a private channel, and let's say I have 5 people on my team. I want to only have 3 people on that team have access to this channel. I can create a private channel and collaborate within that team for a subset of people in that team. So it's still not kind of breaking any boundaries as far as having collaborative spaces. What a shared channel does is it gives us the ability to create a channel as part of a team, but then manage the individuals within that shared channel, both internally and externally at the channel level. So let's say I'm working on a project, and my team, I have Project SOAR, which is my team, and then and I have a channel that's just called let's say communications, and we want to start working on the communications problem. We're going to deploy Project SOAR, but we only really want to work with when we have an external vendor that we need to work with around building those communications. We don't need to bring over now a shared channel. We don't need to bring over the entire. We don't need to invite people to the entire team from the external side to work within that channel. We can actually just invite those external parties directly into that shared channel and collaborate there. I mean, the best part about this that I'll probably say 10 times that we don't need to do tenant switching. So when I talk a little bit more about guest sharing versus shared channel sharing, there's a difference between the two. But one of the biggest advantages we're going to get with shared channels with this new identity structure is we don't need to switch tenants for the people accessing it. So we start to see both of our internal channels, our shared channels internally, and any of the shared channels that we've been added to externally to really start to address that team proliferation where you have hundreds of teams where you need to be very specific with these granular activities. You can scale this much easier because it kind of grows by adding people in and out of that shared channel itself. So really starting to change the idea of how we can collaborate with people inside of these channels. So what you have is 2 ways to work with people. So shared channels is not just for external. I actually think shared channels, the biggest effort I'm going to see in shared channels, or the biggest gain we're going to see is in tenant work. So shared channels you can share stuff with people. I can share a channel with a person, which can be both in tenant people or external, right? So I can create a shared channel in my environment. I can share it with anyone else in my tenants. We don't have to deal with external access. So the ability to do external access is available, but not required when working with shared channels. So you can do in tenant and external to add single people into that channel, right? That's pretty straightforward. One of the bigger things we get now is you can share a channel with a team, right? So let's say I don't know if I need to have just a single person access this. I want to take this channel and I want to share it with a team. You can share that channel with internal teams and external teams. So let's say I wanted to have a shared channel for that communication site. I wanted to share it with a different project that's also working on it. So maybe that vendor can work between projects. I can actually share that channel with another project site, with another project team, And then those external vendors will still have the same access, or the internal vendors will have the same access to work with the single channel, not having to create duplicates for different within those different teams. So think of that as sharing with people. If I want to do a direct sharing, I want to add one person's channel, both internal and external. If I want to share with the team, which then allows me to grant extended access into that environment. So with that, let's take a look at what shared channels actually looks like. So shared channels, I'm going to start off with a story. So I'm Drew. I'm in my tenant, you'll see up here, called Madelung. So I'm Drew, and I'm going to be working with a company called Timely. So I have my collection of teams over here, and you see this is nothing special, just my set of teams. You will see one down here called Shared Channel Test with an @ symbol. This is actually an external channel that I have access to as part of my Madelung environment. I can open on here, and we have this. What we have is a new icon under. So I have a team called this time to share. And you can see I have this new icon here, right? This linking icon. This is a shared channel. So this shared channel is I created under the team called this time to share. You can see I have the lock for a private channel, and I have these these standard channels as well. So I have a general. Every team has a general channel. I created one called standard just to show the differences between a shared channel, a standard channel, and a private channel. So when I go to a standard channel, there's nothing different. I look at this channel, there's simply I'm not even put anything in here because I can just have a conversation. Hello. And the only people that have access to this channel are the people that are actually part of the overall team. So when I look at manage channel, I don't really have any options to manage this channel. It's simply the channel settings themselves because the permissions are inherited down for whoever has access to this team. So when I look at the team for its time to share, so here's my team, you're going to see I have my owner, so myself, and I also have Aaron Rogers as the owner of this team. And you're going to see I have a member and guest as part of this team. So I actually have a guest account down here that's part of this team. When I look at it, it's going to be actually my Outlook account. So my Outlook account is also part of this team here. As I go into my channels, you're going to see I have another option in here called share channels. So I have a new shared channel in here, right here. And this is actually one that if I look at it and I click manage channel, I'm actually going to see some different things. So I'm actually going to see different members that are part of this, both internal and external. And I'm going to see teams that have been shared with this channel as well. So setting that stage, what does that look like? So I'm going to come into my shared channel. So I'm logged in as Drew over here. And you can see I have multiple communications set up here. Let me start another conversation here, and I can say, this is a great looking shared channel. Now what I'm going to pull up here, and put that to the side. I'm going to pull up another tab here, like right here. And it looks very similar, but I'm actually logged into this environment. This is a Timely environment, and I'm logged in as Magneto. Okay. So Magneto has this channel shared to them. I'm going to pull this up side by side. So I'm Magneto. I'm logged on the right here. I'm logged into my Timely tenant. I'm not logged into the Madelung tenant. I'm logged into my Timely tenant. As I look down here, I'm going to have that shared channel. You're going to see what tenant it's shared under. So it's @ Madelung tenant. It's under the is time to share team. And there's a channel that was shared with Magneto called new shared. And you're actually going to see it. It gives us an external naming scheme right next to it to know that this is an external channel. So I can actually come in here and as Magneto, and I can say, this is a great shared channel. And as I'm communicating, you'll see the collaboration seamlessly work between this environment and my Madelung environment. So I have myself logged into this Timely tenant, communicating to a shared channel that I've shared within my Madelung tenant to someone externally. And we can just simply collaborate however we would like. I can actually come in here as the external user. Let me go in and I can go look at like this issue tracker. So I can actually access things like SharePoint lists in here. I have the ability to collaborate however I would be really thinking I would need to collaborate as I would internally, as I would with any other environment, I would say. I can go back and look at the files. So we think one of the primary use cases for working with content is working with files. I can actually pull up these documents, I can pull up these files both as the internal user, so think of it as the host tenant, as the guest account coming in here, I'm able to actually collaborate on this content, right? So I'm still logged in my Timely environment. I can come in here and I can start working, co-authoring on this content live while having one environment up and the other environment at the same time, right? So really enhanced capabilities that we'd have that are not normally what you would see. So if you think of the primary experience that we used to have without shared channels, is we'd actually have to log in as a guest, right? So if I think coming back to that environment that I have for that this team has been shared with also my Outlook account, I can just come in, and this is what the guest experience looks like. So just to give some clarity on the guest experience. So I'm now actually logged in here as my Outlook account. I'm logged in my Outlook account into this. I was invited into the Madelung tenant as a guest, and I can see I was added to the team called It's Time to Share. You can see over here, I don't have access to that private channel or that shared channel, but I have access to the overall team, and I can work within this team, within this It's Time to Share team as the guest account in this environment. So two different ways to do it, right? I'm actually have to log in as tenant versus if I was in my personal account, my personal teams, I don't necessarily have that visibility to say I can see it live within my team without having to do that tenant switch. And that at its core is to me the biggest advantage you get is with that lack of context switching to work between these two environments. Now, what it looks like to create that channel is when I go into the ellipsis and I click add channel, we have the new option down here for privacy called shared. So once you've enabled shared channels in your environment, you're able to come down here, pick a shared channel, and you can create them with any team that you would like. So as a team owner, you have the ability to go create those. Once you've created them, we have the new option here down here called share channel. And when we click share channel, as I said, you can share with people, with a team, or with a team you own. So if I wanted to share the channel with someone else in my environment, I can share with people. And since I'm in the Drew Madelung environment, I can invite, let's say I can invite Jordan Spieth. He's also in my tenants. You can see this is someone actually in my environment. So he's under drewmadelung.com. I could also share this externally. So if I get rid of that and let's send it to deadpool at timely0365.com. So this is someone external to this environment, and you're going to see when I started add external, I can pick that external user. So I can share this channel with someone internally or externally. I can also take this channel and I can share it, with a team. Now, what's interesting about when you're sharing with a team is you actually start out by sending an invite to a team owner. So a team owner has to accept the invite to that team. So they're basically saying, I'm accepting the permissions to this environment. And you can do this both internally or externally, right? So I could type in, I say Jordan has a channel that I want or Jordan has a team that I want to share this channel to. I can send it to Jordan, and Jordan would get the invite and say, hey, Drew's trying to share a channel with you. Please pick the team that you are allowing him to join. Right? So I can actually share that channel with a team from someone else. And a little more clear, I can actually share a channel with a team that I own. Right? So then I can actually, if I'm Drew and I can want to share it with shared time here, I've actually shared this new shared channel internally to the shared time team that I already own. So if I click up there, you're going to see I have that same experience of clicking between. You can actually, without even fairly hard to see as I click through it, that this user experience doesn't even change because I'm working with the same channel across these teams. Right? So something that is thinking about this as internal sharing versus coming back over here. If I look at this other environment, this would be external sharing. So internal shared channels, external shared channels, all of them work with the goal to seamlessly collaborate with that content, both files, apps, tabs, all together in a channel experience. So with that, I'm going to come back to the slides and let's go a little bit deeper into what does this look like to get this set up and how does this work. So to reiterate, what we're doing is we can really, this is not just for chat, it works with files. You can work with your team directly. You can actually schedule meetings inside of this, work on the apps, and you can start to partner with different organizations to figure out who you need to have access to and who doesn't. To set this up, what we have to do is you first need to enable public preview for your host and invitee tenant. So think of this as you have a host tenant. So whoever creates the shared channel, that's where the host is, and the people being invited also need to have access to do this. So what you need to do is you turn on your Teams policy for public preview, so set that to enabled, and then you need to go update your Teams policy to make sure you can say create shared channels is on. And so you can, we now have 3 different options now for our shared channel, for our Teams policies as it relates to shared channels: creation, the ability to share with external users, so if you just want to do shared channels internally, and the ability to participate. So that's the outgoing. If I want to log in, if I want to allow the ability for people to log in to other shared channels outside of my environment, that's that bottom checkbox. And just like any Teams policies, you can create these to segment them down to different users as you need. When you are accessing these shared channels, there is a new logic that is built behind the scenes, and it's called B2B Direct Connect. So when you're accessing channel, think of this as an entirely new identity construct that is going to continue to grow. So its first release for this, for basically the first solution that uses B2B Direct Connect, is shared channels. So if you're in a regular standard channel or a private channel, internal works the same. If you're part of your directory, it's all going to work. If you're part of a regular or private channel, what works there is it's called B2B collaboration. So that's that standard guest sharing experience that's been around for years, where you invite someone in, they can become part of the team, they become part of your directory, and they're part of, and you can work with them seamlessly. But that involves that user tenant switching back over. Shared channels uses B2B Direct Connect, right? And this is all about a new functionality to say, I'm going to trust another environment. And when I trust that other environment, I'm going to allow them to pass through into my environment. So I don't actually create accounts inside of my host environment or my resource environment. It's going to trust and directly connect between 2 tenants. So between business to business, I'm going to directly connect these 2 tenants, not forcing guest access. So think of this as external versus guest. I'm going to use that language as I continue to talk about this. And a key piece here is they don't overlap. So I can't have B2B guest users and B2B Direct Connect users in the same channel. So shared channels do not allow guest access as part of it. So how does B2B Direct Connect work? So what this does is you are establishing a mutual trust between 2 tenants. So think about this as more of if you have partners or companies that you have trusted, once you have established that trust, where you actually configure an Azure AD, and we say, I'm going to accept inbound or outbound access to another tenant. So think of that environment at Madelung Inc. I trusted Timely. Once I established that trust, I was able to seamlessly share with any user in the organization. I can restrict that down, but by default, you can set it up to be, once you establish that trust, it says who can do what, and who can come in and who can't. And for this, it's all about the resource tenant. So think of this as wherever that channel is hosted, that is your resource tenant. You need to have a trust between the 2. But when you start to get into the details of how it works, it's all about that resource tenant for wherever that shared channel is originally established. So when you're setting this up for external, I want to go deeper into guests and not guests. So guests and external. So B2B collaboration adds a guest account in your directory. So this would be if I go into a team and I say add user into the team, or if I go anywhere in the Teams admin center settings or any of the B2B collaboration settings, all of those are based around guest access, where I'm actually bringing an account into my directory. That's how file sharing works. So as long as you've, modern file sharing right now, as long as you've enabled the B2B collaboration, when I share a file, it actually uses this and it adds the guest account to our environment. The power here is it does add it to your entire team, right? So if I had a team and I had a bunch of channels, it makes a lot of sense to bring a guest user into that so they can be part of our environment. And this also allows them to use non-Azure AD accounts to come in. It does force them to do tenant switching within teams, but there is a use case for this. So this is not going away. These will work hand in hand. Guest accounts are not going away. This is simply because guest accounts are, this is not just for M365, right? This is a way to bring an external user into your directory. So that's one. With B2B Direct Connect, now we have no guest account in our resource tenant. So the external participants are using their own Azure identity to come in, which is how we're able to disallow or not require that tenant switching, which means they can stay in their Teams client and not have to log into that secondary tenant, which would basically be like log into their guest account, right? So that's how the big separation works. And you're going to see that external annotation, which is going to differ from the guest annotation. And that's how you're able to know if you're starting to work with guest accounts or the external accounts themselves. So knowing that they're not the same, right? They have different features available for them both. So if you are working within your organization, like just simply I am internal, it's yet you can obviously do everything, right? I can perform access reviews, I can share a channel, I can share files, I can access shared channels, I can access private channels, all of that works. Guest accounts can't come into shared channels. Since, I mean, it's a completely different identity structure. So if I create a shared channel, I can't bring a guest account into it because that requires us to use B2B Direct Connect. So guest accounts cannot come into shared channels. External accounts, so the Direct Connect accounts, for guest accounts, the other thing is that's how file sharing works. So if I share a file, it's going to create that guest account. For B2B Direct Connect, what happens there is they are the ones that come into shared channels. They're the ones that can be part of shared channels, but they can't come in and do other things. So they can't come in and access the overall team. They can't come in and access shared private channels. And they can't, and if I wanted to share, let's say that Magneto account, if I wanted to share a file with Magneto, it's not going to use the B2B Direct Connect functionality. It's going to use the guest account. So there are limitations to get into the shared channel itself for working with it, but the difference is right, guest versus external. And take that as a big takeaway from this is how to the management for both of those. It is a different identity structure. So when you set this up, you're going to set this up within the B2B Direct Connect settings. And here we're able to define inbound or outbound access. So think of this as what am I going to allow in? So going back to the resource tenant idea, what am I going to be allowing in? So what am I going to allow external people to come in? And outbound is what am I going to allow external people to go out? So my internal people to go externally. Okay, so, and prior I said shared channels is on, B2B direct default is off. Okay, so if you're worried about having shared channels automatically being enabled today and people sharing externally, someone has to actually go in and configure these cross-tenant access settings to be able to make this work externally, but by default it's on internally. So and this is where you establish that trust between inbound and outbound access. And I can start to get very granular to the user or app level and say, I want to only allow these people to go inbound, only allow these people to go outbound. And that can actually start, now I can actually do this work where I can trust the claims from those external tenants. So let's say I have conditional access policies that require MFA. Right? That the common guest access settings, I require MFA for my guest accounts. If someone in that guest account, so we've established that trust with another tenant, let's say that Timely environment. If Timely has a conditional access setting to say enforce MFA, what we can do with Direct Connect is trust that MFA, trust that token that was already generated from the Timely environment into our resource tenant, from a Madelung environment. So it kind of allows us to still have the same level of control that we would want to have, but we don't have to have duplicate policies. I can say, I trust that other environment to come in. I trust that MFA settings. And this one's, I trust a compliant device. So we can get a little more specific with the types of controls we have for those external people coming to our environment. So what does this look like? What does Direct Connect look like when setting this up? So I'm going to come back into my Madelung environment. I'm going to go into Azure AD. So this is all configured in Azure AD. And where we start is we actually start under external identities. Okay, so under external identities is where we will be going to go set up our B2B Direct Connect. Where we go to set up our B2B Direct Connect settings. On the top left, we have this preview section that says cross-tenant access settings. So when I go into that, you're going to see two different sections. We're going to see organizational, default. Okay. So now when I go into one of these, let's go into Timely. So this is the example I was going through is I've established a trust with a Timely organization, and I have the options to do inbound and outbound access. So right now I'm simply inherited from default. Right? I haven't done anything specific. I've simply said I'm trusting the default settings. So if I go into default settings, what am I actually looking at here? What can I set? So I'm going to edit my inbound settings. And you see up on top here, I have B2B Collab, B2B Direct Connect, and Trust. So if I'm working with guest environments, so that B2B guest scenario for cross-tenant, this is where I would set those. So I can actually pick specific people, specific applications for B2B collaboration. For this environment, we're talking about B2B Direct Connect. So it is as simple as coming in and saying, I want to allow access for this example, I'll allow access for all users for the Timely environment. So basically I'm saying in this setting is, I've trusted Timely, I'm going to allow access to all users, and I can default to applications. So I can pick, do I want to allow access or block access, but I want to allow access to applications. That's my default settings I've set in my environment. So when I go back and look at Timely, I look at my settings and I say, I've trusted Timely. I'm now saying under the Timely organization, which is that other Azure AD environment, I am trusting. I'm using the default settings to say I'm trusting everything. I'm allowing anyone from the Timely environment to be able to come in. I can get granular, right? So I can say I only want specific people, I only want specific applications, but you can also, so you can get as granular as you need to, but this is where you go set it up. This is where you set up your external configuration to trust that tenant and say what you can do within that tenant for external users and the applications that they access. Obviously, if you block Teams, it won't work. So the core application for B2B Direct Connect today is Teams, and that's where we'll be living, is out here. So that's as easy as it is to configure. You go in here, you add a domain, you trust that domain, and you can configure the inbound and outbound access. And once you do that, I come in here and I can go to the share channel, I can share a channel with people. And once I've done that, I could type in, again, that's how I can type in Deadpool at timely0365.microsoft.com, and I'm able to add them here as an external account. Now you do need to establish it in both ways, okay? So when I go into this Timely environment over here, I've done the same thing. So in the Timely environment, I have established a trust with Madelung. And I've actually configured inbound access here to say I'm trusting certain people to come inbound into Madelung Inc. as well. So you're really establishing, there's some conversation you need to have around what you can do with within the tenants or within your AD environment to trust other environments. So you establish both of those. Once you do that, I could come into the same thing. I could add Madelung environments in here, but I can also consume as an outgoing into the Madelung tenant. Now, once you get into this, right, I come a lot from the IT pro background. I think about controls. It defaults a lot to open it, and a lot of stuff defaults to open. And I like to make sure we have the right controls in place to bring this down. And there are controls. So there are controls for Teams admins. There are controls for channel owners and Teams owners. So by default, this is on. So what the Teams admin does to get this started, Teams admin can set that preview settings, and they can set up that per user policy for allowing creation both internal and external for shared channels. In the Teams admin center, you can actually go out and control the channels, right? So I can actually create channels, modify channels. I can do all of that. I can manage members. Teams administrators can basically go in and do configure what you'd expect to configure for allowing shared channels to be created and managing shared channels if you'd like to at scale, right? So how many teams have shared channels? How many have how many have external accounts as part of them? Do I want to create them and delete them? All of that can be done from a Teams admin side. The Teams owner side, so this is a little bit more where we hand off, right? We think about governance here. So Teams owners are the ones that can create shared channels. And so basically a regular member can't go out and create a shared channel, a team owner can. And once the team owner creates one, it basically creates that new permission model, and that team owner becomes a channel owner. And that basically once they've established that channel becomes kind of its own entity. The team owner itself can still come in and see those shared channels, but a key piece is if let's say the team has 5 team owners and one of the team owners goes out and creates a shared channel, it does automatically inherit every team owner. The team owners can see that they're shared channels, but they can't go in without being added as a member to that shared channel. Right? So think of it as building a new permission model underneath it. I can grant access. The owners can see all of it if they would like, but they which ties into then is you drill into channel owners. So once guest account or not external people can't be channel owners. So think of this as kind of like a mini team owner, because the shared channel is almost like a mini team now. And that channel owner manages the membership. So if you think about the account I was using, I was actually sharing, that channel, that new shared channel. I was a channel owner. If I was a different team owner, it doesn't mean I could share it. And so the channel owners define the membership. They define who can come in, who can come out, and they're also the ability to remove them. What's nice about this and shared, that you can never have an orphaned shared channel. So I can't get rid of the last owner. It doesn't let you, and if a shared channel becomes ownerless, so like if the last owner leaves, like if there's only one there, it's actually going to grab a channel member and populate it back up, so they can, so they don't have to have that, let's say, service ticket to go out to have orphan shared channels. And once you go into that, this also has the ability to kind of manage the channels that they would. So if you want to have different channel settings than the team settings, you can go in and do that or inherit back from the team. So what does that look like a little more specifically? The team owners have the ability to create those shared channels. The team members have the ability to kind of be part of those. They can't delete those shared channels. But one to highlight here is that you now have a shared channel owner, a shared channel member. So those have different permission models of what they can do. So shared channel owner can delete that shared channel. They basically become the channel owner. So if you look at the left column of team owner, you get down to the sections of add members, edit settings, manage tabs and apps. The team owner doesn't do that. The shared channel owner does. Okay. And you'll see team guest, that's that guest account. They can't really do anything. They can come in and they just participate. They can't create. They don't really have ownership capabilities. So what does that look like? So coming back into this environment here, into my Madelung environment, I'm going to go back into, and I'm going to go into it's time to share and go to manage team. So again, to highlight this, this is the team, this is the overall team of it's time to share. I have channels, I have settings, I have the team owners here, and I have the members and guests. So I have that, as I showed, I had that Madelung account as a guest account in this entire tenant. But if I go into the manage channel under the share channel, I'm going to have this collection of members. So I can actually come in here, as I am marked as a channel owner, so you'll see this doesn't follow the same permission model as up top. I have a different permission model in here, which means me and Aaron are the owners. I have Magneto as an external member and Tiger and Jordan as internal members. And I've shared this channel both to the parent team, so everyone on the team has access to it. You don't have to do that. And I've shared it to another team called Shared Time. Okay, so I have the ability to control this as a channel, as a shared channel owner. It's up to you to be the one that dictates what these people can be, right? You actually can see I can promote these internal people to owners. I cannot promote the external person to be an owner, but I can remove them, right? I can get rid of Magneto if I didn't want them. I can look at the invites that have been sent. So if I've sent invites for people to join, they'd see them here. And if I wanted to go through the permissions to say like what these members can and can't do, I see that all in here. Okay, so the point is the shared channel owner is the one that has the power here. So as we go, thinking about management of this, and we think about governance of it, what happens for SharePoint, right? I showed that you can collaborate with files. So just like private channels, a shared channel creates a new SharePoint site. It creates its own SharePoint site with a template ID of team channel 0. And you can manage this from the SharePoint Admin Center. It does create, so you can want to see it, you want to manage it. You can really kind of do what you would want there. So think of this as just be aware, like it does create another SharePoint site because that's how it manages the permissions around that. The biggest change with this is no guest users or anyone. So like if I wanted to go to that SharePoint site and share a file with someone else not part of that shared channel, since it uses Direct Connect, I can't share it with a guest account. Right? It has to be someone that's only internal in this environment or part of the B2B, or basically already has access to that channel. And the external users, though, as I showed, can easily access SharePoint. They don't have to switch tenants or anything. They can be logged in with their Timely or their own tenant and log in and access SharePoint as you would expect. That does give you, if you're coming in externally, it gives you a little header up top to show, and the usernames always has, depending on which angle you're in, whether you're the resource tenant or the destination, the attendee or the invitee tenant, they show external and whichever direction is external to you. So what does that look like from a more detailed side? If I'm clicking on my channel breakdown here, you'll see I have standard channels, which all exist under the root SharePoint, like the team SharePoint site. And when I go into the private channel, that has its own. I go into the shared channel, that also has its own. So private and shared create their own SharePoint sites. Standard channels create folders when you're working with files under that parent SharePoint site. If you want to set up meetings, so meetings work just fine both internally and externally. So I can go in there, I can, when I'm in the messaging, I can go and create a meeting. Channel members are not added by default, and the host tenant is the one that can start it. So if I'm one of those B2B Direct Connect users, they're not going to be able to really schedule it. They can participate, but you have that host tenant that needs to schedule it or initiate that meet now setting. But again, fully works supported in shared channels. Shared channels also support apps. So I showed you SharePoint. I could create different apps. There's a collection of applications that's listed out on the Microsoft site to say which ones are supported. This is not just Microsoft apps, or multiple third parties that can, and you can go build your own. So there's a great build session that's out there that was from last month around how to build applications for shared channels. So if you are a developer, these are fully supported. You can build, basically, there's a new JavaScript module. You need to update that to get access to see it. But once you have that, you can start to build your own applications to support this, and there are out-of-the-box ones that do work. There are some that don't. What's like Planner doesn't work as of today. It's kind of the bigger one that I've noticed. On that dev side, what's been updated from an API side is we have new APIs, right? So we can actually start to see the shared with details. So if you are a developer, you're working with some of this data, or you wanted to get, you're running your jobs to go figure out who has access to what, or what teams are shared. The Graph API has updated new API endpoints for share with teams, like the invitees. So not in PowerShell yet, so still fully just from a Graph perspective, but you can come out and start to get some more details around your shared channels from a developer perspective. Security compliance. So this one's kind of near and dear to my heart for doing a lot of this work. The key thing to notice is it's all about the host tenant. So anything that's established in the host tenant, the external users, the B2B Direct Connect users are going to apply to it. So the host tenant compliance policies apply. Think of that as I'm going to, if I've created a shared channel in my host tenant and I have multi-geo, it's going to create that shared channel in that same geo. So it's multi-geo aware. It's still based on a resource tenant. If I'm doing e-discovery, fully supported, I can do e-discovery for those against that existing SharePoint site. It uses a new system mailbox for this to discover any of those chat messages. Again, all of this is important. If I have DLP rules, so let's say I set up a DLP rule around not allowing social security numbers to be shared in chat, as long as it's established on the host tenant and the external people come in, they apply to that, right? So they're beholden to those same rules, the same retention, the same DLP rules, and all the auditing and review activity occurs in that host tenant. So if you wanted to see who came in, when they came in, what they were doing from a file activity, all of that is logged in that host tenant. So think of this, when you're in this world, it's okay to be part of this, and think about if I'm allowing all about the host tenant and what rules I have set up there. So if I've already set up teams, all of these rules, and I've turned on shared channels, this will all follow it. I don't have it in here, but sensitivity labels also follows it. So if I've set container level, it brings it down into the shared channel itself. There are a few limits. Right now, Stream, Planner, and Forms aren't supported from a tabs perspective. So Planner is more the one I've noticed is kind of a hit if you were working with an external partners and we wanted to see them come in. We also can't convert. So if I have a private channel or a general channel or standard channel today and I wanted to convert it to a shared channel, there's no way to convert that action. I actually would need to go create a new channel and invite those people into there and move that and migrate that content. There are, I haven't seen anyone even get close to this limit. 200 shared channels per team, right? That's a lot. That hasn't really changed, and we can't really have more than 5,000 members. So some pretty high limits. I'm not sure if we'll hit those from a shared channel perspective on day one, but need to be aware of them. Primarily the apps that aren't supported and the ability to convert. So public for use now, right? We can go do this today. Go start to work with it. Organizations are working with this today. It's some good ideas around, especially if you're doing a big one I've seen as a push for this is if anyone organization is doing M&A activities and they, let's say on either side of it, and they want to have better teams integration. We've done some pretty complex guest scenarios in the past that kind of goes away with this. We can establish organizational trust, and that's big for external. But I still, as I said at the beginning, I think internal is going to be the biggest push for this. Like we can start to share channels internally. You can start with that, figure out what you need to do from a governance perspective. Think of things like how SysKit you can use to manage and see all those channel activity behind the scenes. And it's okay to do that because the compliance and governance pieces are all included. So if you've done work and effort there, it's not lost. This is something that thankfully we've seen other products not come through with that. This one has. And by default, this is off, so you have to go turn it on and be aware of that host tenant. I've said it multiple times, but that is what's going to be your winner. When I've seen confusion here, it's going to be what rules win. And think of it as always, what rule win is going to be that host tenant environment. And the only thing that's changed is shared channels. This has not gone back and updated private or standard. This is a new channel type, new channel features, and a new way to deploy them. So with that, I know we're going to jump into a demo here, so I'll leave this up for some. We'll come back to some questions here. I'll put my information back up when we go to it, but yeah, let's come back and we can jump onto and talk a little bit more about SysKit.
Great. Thank you, Drew. This was an absolutely awesome presentation, and I'm sure all of the attendees liked it due to the amount of activity we got in the question section. And yeah, for everyone else who didn't ask the question and have one for Drew, feel free to drop it out there. And he's going to answer them all in the Q&A session a bit later. So before we go into that, there's still another thing to do, and this is a quick demo of SysKit Point tool. This is going to be hosted by our lead product owner, Mario, and he's going to be showing you how SysKit Point tool can help you discover shared channels in your tenant. Just before I jump into that, a quick note, there is a case study available in the handout section. I believe you should all be able to see it. It's for the Rimac Automobile company for SysKit Point. And on an interesting note, they make the fastest production electrical car in the world. So yeah, going back to our demo, Mario, are you ready?
Yes, I am. Thanks, Silvio. Hello, everyone. Thank you, Drew, for a great presentation. So yeah, as Silvio said, my name is Mario, and I will have a short demo about SysKit Point, and I will show you how it can detect shared channels and show users in those channels. So first few words about SysKit Point. It's our solution for Microsoft 365 governance and security that empowers admins, IT pros, and end users to bring cloud security to the next level. It provides full visibility of the whole M365 environment. So from one screen, you can actually see the inventory of all your SharePoint sites, groups, teams, and OneDrive. And you can easily see who has access to your content, who is doing what, like sharing, accessing, deleting files, who are guest users, where they have access, and you can automate your company governance policies like perform access review, automate detection of inactive teams, and so on. But in today's demo, we'll focus on shared channels. So let's say you are an admin and you want to find out which teams actually have shared channels. So you can easily do that. You can go to teams and groups, where you will see all your teams and groups. And if you want to see which of them have shared channels, you can do this in two different ways. Okay, you can include shared channels and private standard channels columns and see which teams have some channels. Or you can change the view and filter only teams with shared channels. So if you want to see those shared channels, for example, let's say sales and marketing. This team has 2 shared channels. You can drill down and see all the details about that team and list of the channels. For example, you see 5 channels here, 2 shared, 2 standard, and 1 private. And if you want to see users in those channels, you can drill down deeper and see all internal and external members of those shared channels. Drew also mentioned that shared channels can be shared also with teams. So you can also see that here in SysKit Point. This is shared with external team design and also internal team products review. Here you can also see the domain column. It actually shows from which company this user comes from. Also, you can see the content inside that channel. If we click explore, we see all the content. We have few files here, and we can also check activities. So see who is doing what with those files in shared channels. So for example, you can see who is accessing, uploading files, and so on. Let's filter by uploaded, and we can see that Alan uploaded this file from this file project timeline. So you can see different domains here. So this one is actually my tenant where I'm logged in, and this one is external tenant. So this is a user from external domain. And now we saw how we can easily see which teams have shared channels and members of those channels. But what if we want to see all the external users who have access to shared channels from one place? So we can also do that. We can go to users, then filter by external users, and we'll see all types of external users. Drew also mentioned that before. So for example, guest user is a user who is added in Azure AD and can be added as a member in your teams. Ad hoc guest is are users who are not registered in your Azure AD, and they can access only to files shared directly to them. And shared channel users are also cannot be seen in Azure AD, and they are all obviously added somewhere in shared channels. And if you want to see in which shared channels they were added, you can easily select those users and generate the user access report and see, for example, that Alan has been added to those 2 shared channels. And let's go back to the list of guest users. And also you can see what they are doing in your environment. You can select any user and check the activity for these users. Like you can see also when this user was added, what is shared with them, and what is this user doing, like which file is uploading, deleting, and so on. And yeah, actually that's it. That's everything related to shared channels for now in SysKit Point. So in the future, we will also add ability to perform access reviews for shared channels. So admins will be able to ask team owners to perform reviews on their teams and shared channels. And yeah, so this is this feature is currently also in the development phase, and it will be available in mid-July. So yeah, stay tuned. Silvio, we can go back to you.
Thank you, Mario. This was a great demo, but we wouldn't take anything less from you, right? So yeah, it is now time for us, Drew, to do this Q&A session. I think we have a lot of people nervously waiting for us to start. So are you ready?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna read the question by question. Some of those you did partially maybe answer, but it's okay. Okay, so the first question I'm starting from, by timeline was, what is tenant switching?
Yeah, so tenant switching is the idea of, let's take an example if you've logged into Teams on your phone. right? When you log into Teams in your phone, you're actively logged into a team. Or if I've logged into Teams on my client, a better example, I open my desktop, I open up my Teams client, I'm logged into a tenant. So if you look in the top right, you're logged into some environment. So if you're logged into your organizational environment, that's where you're logged. So when I log into Protiviti. If let's say SysKit, so SysKit also has teams. Let's say SysKit wanted to share a team. I wanted to join. Silvio invited me to a team, and on SysKit side, if I'm logged into I open up my desktop client. I'm logged into Protiviti. I can't access SysKit. I have to switch to the SysKit tenant. So what you actually do is you go up into the top right, whether you're in the client or the app, and click down, and I would drop down where it says your organization and pick the other tenant. So I'd have to go into SysKit. I'd click on SysKit, it would log me out, log me back into SysKit, and then I would be able to see and collaborate with the content within SysKit. But I couldn't go back and work on my existing Protiviti. So if someone, let's say, tried to ping me and I was on my client, I can't go back and work on both. I have to literally switch context completely, go to the other tenant. So I mean, the way that most people have done it over the years is, especially myself, like as a consultant, I have multiple tabs up or multiple versions of Chrome or Edge up with different profiles to log into different tenants, because I can't switch. I need to be able to access multiple environments at one time. So that's the idea of switching it. And when you have shared channels, I don't have to. Right? So if you think of that, what I was showing with Timely, I was actually accessing my Timely, or let's say go back to SysKit and Protiviti. If Silvio shared a channel with me and I was in Protiviti and he added to my Protiviti account, I wouldn't have to log into SysKit. I would just collaborate with SysKit with staying logged into my existing Protiviti tenant.
Okay, thank you, Drew. The next question we have is, any idea how this, I'm guessing shared channels, will work with the new nested AAD dynamic groups?
It shouldn't have much. It won't interact in the same way. So because I can't take these AD. So if I think of the direct connect users coming in, right? I don't have an account in my resource environment. So the nested dynamic groups all deals with, in any dynamic groups, deals with having an account in that environment. So if we go back to the SysKit Protiviti conversation, if Silvio invited me into a shared channel and Silvio had dynamic AD groups, I don't have an account in his environment. So there's nothing that I can do to control that access from a dynamic group or nested group perspective. So technically it's like zero for shared channels. It's much more on where you have account membership. So the resource tenant, if you have accounts in there, you can start to manage it that way. It won't impact B2B Direct Connect and shared channels as a whole.
Okay, great. Thank you. The next one we have is, will the governance settings for my organization still apply on a shared channel even if the external organization has different settings? For example, my organization deletes chat messages after 2 weeks. Would those be deleted in the external organization view too?
No, and that's one of the best ones, right? Talking with companies about this, that's why I probably said the word host tenant 50 times, I think, is if your environment, so if SysKit had a 2-day deletion or a 2-week deletion for chats and channel messages, if I log into and I'm invited and Protiviti has 2 years, if I log into the SysKit tenant, it's going to be the 2 weeks. It's going to be whatever that host tenant is, that's the rules that win. So in your environment, if you have set 2 weeks for Teams channel deletion, anyone external come in all of the channel messages in that, it will fall as part of that policy. So if you have whatever environment, so if SysKit has 2 weeks and I have 2 years, if Silvio came to my environment, he'd have 2 years. The chat would be 2 years in shared channels. So it's whatever the shared channel host is what the policy is that wins.
Okay, great. Thank you, Drew. Just as an info, I mean, we're gonna go a bit over time here, so whoever does not have a hard stop from the attendees, please stay. We're gonna answer the most questions we can, and if you can't, you're gonna have them in a recording. Okay, next one. I gave you a bit of a rest there, Drew. Okay, so what are your thoughts about allowing users into shared teams who do not have teams, client, or are not using Office 365, so they have no tenant at all? I'm thinking about folks using G Suite, for example.
And this is hard. I mean, there's no good answer. Right? They can't use this setup. we're put in a situation where we're stuck to, if you want to use shared channels, you have to, both of them have to be used in Azure AD. And it's like, it's not great, right? Like people use G Suite, it exists. You can, if you're using G Suite and if you have that environment, you'll be using, or if you're using non-Azure, basically non-Azure AD environments, you'll be sticking with B2B collaboration, right? And that's why you have both, in my opinion. They're not getting rid of guest collaboration. If your partner is not using G Suite and using O365 and Azure AD, or actually just even Azure AD, you can do this. If they have non-Azure AD, we're stuck. I shouldn't say we're stuck, but you can still use B2B collaboration to guest access. It's just you don't get that's worked for years. And you can actually, if you have G Suite, you can establish a federation with G Suite too from an Azure AD perspective. So it can be seamless but it won't be direct connect. It won't be the shared channel concept. And I don't see how that would necessarily change because of the way that it's set up. So kind of Microsoft, it's kind of shared teams forcing you into what's possible, right? Again, this still is in public preview, so don't know where it's completely going to go. But if you're using G Suite, you'll be in B2B Collab. Right now, it's only Azure AD for Direct Connect and shared channels.
Okay, great, thank you. Next one is, if you have an MS team that is set to not allow external guest sharing, do the sharing channels within the team still allow external sharing?
No, so anything that has, you have to have external sharing on in your environment and within the team to allow shared channels to be shared externally. So think of it as like a hierarchy. So I demoed Direct Connect to show you need to turn this on to be able to allow external access. You still need to have external access enabled on the team side. So think of it as like the parent is AD, then you have the team's admin, which you have to have external access on. And so you have to have them both. Think of the parent and then the child of the team. So and you need to have external sharing on in SharePoint too. So you can't have external sharing off in SharePoint. You have to have external sharing on at the service level and at the Azure AD level to allow external sharing within a shared channel. Or I guess, yeah, within a shared channel.
Okay, thank you, great. Next question from Scott. Will you help us better understand the security and access management differences between B2B collaboration and B2B direct connect?
So B2B collaboration, so the security side of this is B2B collaboration will have those guest accounts in there. So when I'm managing, what's most important about the security side for this is what are you doing with those accounts, right? What conditional access policies do we have that were set up to allow certain people, specific people to come in, and what are we doing for those guest accounts? I primarily see MFA coming in. I primarily see terms of use is another good one. And then you have cleanup processes that exist in that host tenant for managing those guest accounts and governance of those guest accounts. And you run different tools like SysKit. You can find reporting to see where those external users have access if it's B2B guests. And you kind of empower the people in your environment to do that external sharing. So it's basically who is allowed to share, how are they allowed to share, where are they allowed to share, and if they do share, what do we do with those accounts? So what do we trust coming in? That stays consistent. It's the same, to me, it's the same concept that you have with Direct Connect, which is who can share, where they can share, how they can share. So those Direct Connect settings of people, applications, and the teams that can share externally. And the difference is we don't have, and we set the trust settings on those to enforce it to like trust that MFA or allow basically trust that their conditional access into ours. So you still have conditional access rules in place. The difference that is between the two for B2B and non is we don't have to have that organizational cleanup or that identity cleanup in that host tenant because they don't have accounts. So what you have is more of what you do is you set up the access reviews from a team's perspective to clean up those external accounts for B2B versus I think of B2B more at the identity level, like doing a guest cleanup as the entire identity versus the resource. So, but once you're in there, permissions are the same, right? Like I'm granting access to a channel, first I'm granting access to a team, first I'm granting access to a file. The second two are B2B, are guest accounts. The first one was B2B Direct Connect or external. So same at the top level is when you get to the governance of those accounts afterwards. You have governance of accounts and non-governance of accounts. You have governance of the resources.
Okay, thank you, Drew. The next question is, does it work with all licenses, premium, standard, E1? I think this is for shared channels, or maybe it was during the time when you were
It
talking
is.
about.
So shared channels works with all of them. So the limiting factor you'll have from licensing is if you want to do granular B2B direct connect settings. So actually, if you saw my demo, my tenant, I don't have P1. So if you wanted to do, let's say, between SysKit and Protiviti, if I wanted to say only like 5 people in Protiviti, only 5 people in Protiviti, and only the Teams application can go inbound into SysKit, that requires advanced licensing. If you just want to turn on external sharing and turn on shared channels, no licensing. Turning on shared channels is 0 licensing. It's only if you want to do granular permission controls externally. That's the only level. That's the only layer where licensing comes into play, which is actually kind of nice, right? We don't have to have like some advanced super teams for business compliance license or something to allow it.
Okay, great, thank you. The next one is, so with B2B Direct, does this mean that we have no record of those external parties in the AAD sign-in logs?
So it is in the sign-in logs. So there's some good documentation when you go look at the B2B Direct Connect side for auditing and logging for it. So absolutely, right? So if you think about a change, if you have, let's say, integration into like a SIM tool or something to know, like if something did occur and you want to know how or when to build reports off of it, it is all tracked in the sign-in logs. It doesn't go away. It's just we don't have I don't have the sign-in, like what I would think is normally I'd look at a sign-in record for the guest account in my environment, and that's how I run my governance. Now I don't look at the user, I look at the logs to say, when did they come in, when was the last login in the logs, not when's the last login by user. So all available there, and I would point to, there's some information on the B2B Direct Connect specific documentation from Microsoft that includes kind of the data points for what it finds, what is tracked, right? There's some specific details about like that sign. Like for this, what I've done is like go sign in, set it up, sign in with one, sign in with a guest, sign in with a regular account, and look at the metadata differences between the two to figure out what reports you'd want to have set up in similar party, most likely a SIM.
Great, thank you. The next one is, does that shared channel get stored in the associated SharePoint site, or is it like a private channel?
So the shared channel will create a new SharePoint site just like a private channel. So if I create a private channel, it creates its own SharePoint site. If I create a shared channel, it creates its own SharePoint site. And it does that because of the permission models, right? Like it needs to have its own way to protect the files. And you don't even ever need to go to the SharePoint site to do it. So I create the shared channel, I access the files tab. That files tab is restricted to the channel, the shared channel. Same thing with private channels, I create that and I can restrict it, similar to what Mario showed for how we can kind of manage those shared channels from a SysKit perspective.
Okay, great. Now we had one question for Mario to give you a bit of a rest, Drew. So Mario, I believe this question came up during the demo. So the SysKit admin can see the actual content in the Teams SharePoint Online, or what can they actually see?
Yes, SysKit Point admin can see actually all teams, all channels, and all the content, because SysKit Point admins are usually SharePoint admins, global admins, so they can see all the content. So all the folders, files inside those channels. Yeah, and of course, users who have access to those channels and files. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Mario. Then the next one we have is, when will shared channels be released to general availability?
I don't know. I don't know.
That was the shortest answer ever.
I mean, it was in bragging for a long time. I mean, I'm not even gonna guess. It's a large change. They're definitely getting active feedback around it. I don't know. And even if I did, I probably wouldn't say it.
Okay. The next one we have is, how would I share a channel with a whole external team from a different tenant?
Yeah. So the way you share a channel with an external team is when you click share, when you create the shared channel and then you say share with a team, you put in the name of the external person that owns that team. So if Silvio owned it, so it does require some communication with each other, right? Like if I was Protiviti and SysKit were working together and I wanted to, and Silvio had a team, and I would need to know that I need to email Silvio, and he would then accept my invitation and pick which team to get added to. So I enter the name of the invitee when I'm sharing that channel with a team, and that invitee gets to pick what team that channel gets shared to, and that's the same experience both internally and externally. The difference would only be if it shared a channel with a team that I own. So if I knew I owned a team and it had to be internal, then I can share it. If it goes external or internal and I'm sharing the team, it goes to a person, and that person accepts that invite.
Okay, thank you, Drew. The next one is, does everybody need to have a P1 license for granular security in the direct B2B?
Yeah, so it would be anyone that's interacting with that shared channel specifically. I mean, the ADP1 licensing is hard because it's a lot of trust but verified. So you always have to kind of move or lean on the side of caution, because you can't. It'd be almost impossible to manage dynamically like who's being added to those teams that would need to have access to it. So basically, if anyone's interacting with that shared channel in any way that has an external account that has a P1 that has basically granular licensing of granular rules applied to it, it would require it. So what I would say is I've never seen an org. I very rarely, I don't think I've ever seen one org that has a reason to do P1 licensing, because when you do P1, you get a lot of the other stuff, and this is just part of it. And the other stuff requires you to have it globally, almost like no matter what. Like, so if you're literally buying P1 licensing just for this direct connect access, I would recommend looking at what else P1 and P2 can do for Azure AD and see how that can help your organization, because it's much easier. It would be almost impossible to try to like dynamically come up with who needs access and who doesn't. It would be a mess. So I always just lean on what else can you do with that tool to use it. If you don't, you don't require it technically unless you access it. And
Okay.
but please, I'm not a licensed expert, so if I ask, that is more of a, if you're a large organization, talk to your Microsoft account team about how to do that. A lot of EAs that can be kind of discussed around that.
Okay, thank you. We're gonna do only two more. So first one is, I would say quite simple. So do you have to use the onmicrosoft.com email address in order to add external people to a shared channel, or can you use their
You can use
organization?
it's just whatever that trusted domain is. So I only had that because buying tenant, I didn't buy that domain. So like you saw, my Drew Madelung environment was, I purchased that domain. I didn't buy the Timely one. So you don't need the on Microsoft account. It can be whatever your primary, it's whatever the primary domain is of that destination or the invitee. So you're not forced to use the internal name. It'd be whatever your primary domain is for that share.
Okay, great. And the last one, when using shared channels, are there backend policies that need to be turned on within the tenant to allow shared channels from other tenants, or does the Open Federation default to allow shared channels?
The Open Federation allows to allow. So so when you turn it on, if I just went in to Direct Connect and said I trust SysKit and said go and didn't change anything, it's all access inbound, all access outbound, all users, all applications. So if you once I trust, you still have to establish that trust with that external environment. Once I've done that, if I don't change anything, it is full. I can invite anyone, they can invite anyone, and it can be on any application, even though right now the application is only Teams. So it's a full open unless you can lock it down.
Okay, great. I think we're gonna close up the Q&A session for now. We're a bit over time. So once again, thank you everyone for joining us on this today's webinar. As mentioned, everyone who registered are gonna receive the recording of this webinar. I really need to thank you, Drew. Thank you, Drew. This was a great presentation and even better, Q&A session. You did a proper community service here. And yeah, it was a pleasure having you on. Hope to talk to you again. If anyone else has any further questions regarding SysKit Point or any other products, you can reach out to us at sales@syskit.com. It was a pleasure having you all on. And yeah, Drew, if you want to say goodbyes, this is the chance.
Thanks, everyone. If you need anything, shoot me an email or reach out to me on Twitter. I'll be glad to continue any conversation here.